Hello Summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan Ng and today we're going to be taking a look at the 3 things that everybody should know about the mid lane. Whether you're new to the role or you just have some bad habits that you need to break, these are essential concepts that you need to have. That way you can establish a good foundation that you can build off of and play mid lane the right way. And even if you aren't playing mid lane yourself, don't close out the video just yet. Even when you main a different role with your own separate win conditions for a game, understanding your teammates' goals can help you play around them and secure that win. Now, before we dive deep into this video, I'd like to take a moment to mention that if you like learning from content like this, you should be able to take a more in-depth look at the concepts and techniques and excel at specific roles and champions through ProGuides.com. With the ProGuides sub, you can get access to all our online courses, unlimited chats with our top-tier coaches, and if you decide to book a session for the tailored one-on-one experience, you'll even get a discounted rate. With all the resources that we have to offer, you'll be able to build that solid foundation that I was talking about and build on it until you're playing like a pro. And there's no time like now to sub because we're running a nice promo for you guys because we love you that much. Use the discount code RANKUP2021 for 20% off your sub now. Anyway, let's get back into the video. The first thing that you need to know as a mid laner is that you have to learn to play around the junglers if you want to consistently do well in this role. I know mid lane has a lot of ego players that think they can always win lane by themselves and that this part doesn't apply to them. Not to call you out, but if you main Zed, Yasuo, or any other edgy or flashy champions, you probably fall into this category. And I'm saying this because I also fall into this category. But something that you need to realize is that mid very rarely comes to purely a 1v1. I'm not saying you need your jungler to win your lane, but if you're the type of player that says, well, I always win my lane but I get camped a lot, then you probably need to pay extra attention to this part. If you're playing a winning lane and you shove to the tower, obviously you're gonna get ganked. If the enemy jungle mid combo has good damage and CC, odds are that you're gonna die to these ganks. Your jungler has to worry about clearing their own camps on top of tending to all 3 lanes. They won't always know exactly when you need them to be sitting in the side brush, waiting to counter gank for you, especially when you're playing in the lower elos where players' awareness is just a little bit lower than when you're in the Master Plus games. So, don't be that player that auto shoves to tower, dives to ganks, and then cries about jungle diff after being the one to feed the sad jungler. This may be a tough pill to swallow because you feel like you're the best player on your team, and honestly, you can be. But if your jungler is not cooperating with you or if you're just getting ganked, then maybe it's time to reconsider. Maybe you're in this elo for a reason. To break this bad mindset of thinking me all the time as a mid laner, you should try to think about mid jungle as a duo just like bot and support. Anyway, speaking of me, if you guys want to join me on my Twitch streams at twitch.tv/Nathan_ing, I would love to play some League of Legends with y'all. Anyway, since bot laners share XP and have lower income due to support not farming, you and your jungler might have a higher carry potential when you successfully work together, especially when you roam together and spread that success to the rest of the map. In your winning lanes, you'll constantly want to think about how junglers are going to be able to affect your lane. If you have a strong early game jungler like Lee Sin or Elise, you can definitely call them to gank, counter gank, or even dive your opponent in certain matchups. But when you have a slower paced jungler or when you're tending to other lanes, you won't always be able to apply your pressure in lane at 100%. Sometimes it's important to recognize the state of the map. If you're in the latter situation and you have no clue where the enemy jungler is, don't try to guess. Many players assume that because an enemy buff is respawning, their jungler is probably there, but that's just the wrong way to go about it. Your first question shouldn't be where should they be, but rather could they be here? If that answer is yes, then you're vulnerable to a gank, and instead of just greeting for the plate or harassing your opponent off the tower, sit back. Just sitting out of vision can camouflage you from the enemy jungler's radar, and if they don't see you in the mid lane, most players aren't going to bother coming and waiting for you to come back. On top of just sitting out of the enemy's vision, you can also spend time getting your own vision or taking a free reset when you crash a wave, so you're not just wasting time every single time you push in the wave. When you place down a ward, you can now always play on that side and lean towards it with no threat of ever dying to a jungle gank. Even if you do push up past the middle point in the lane, as long as you're hugging that side, you'll either see jungle gank coming from that lane, or you just have a safe path to escape if the jungler comes from the opposite side. So far, this has been about not dying to ganks, but what about the other things that you can do specifically to work with your jungler? In some lanes, you may be easily able to shove in the opponents, and even if you aren't vulnerable to ganks, it may be unsafe to walk up and hit the tower. Let's say you're playing somebody like Galio or Rumbo against a control mage. Even if you can push them in, walking up to a tower means that you're just going to be taking a ton of free poke from them just to get a couple of hundred damage on the turret. Instead of trading half your HP to not even get a plate, use this time to work with your jungler. You can simply do scuttle crab with him, invade the enemy jungle together and establish vision, take away a camp or two, or even kill the other jungler if you find them. If your side lanes are set up for it, you can also look to gank or even dive together. As someone who plays a lot of ADC off and on, I can tell you that one of the most tilting things is getting 4-man bot lane. It's like I'm playing against Damwon's junior team while my own jungle and mid are twiddling their thumbs. Everything that we talked about so far has been sort of under the assumption that you're playing the more favorable side of the matchup. Anyway, you can still easily work with your jungler in neutral and even in losing lanes. If you are laning in a neutral state, you should always be warding on and posturing towards the side of the lane that your jungler is on. Since your jungler is in that area, it makes it easier to defend the wards that you place down. Since they can't clear the ward, the enemy team won't be able to gank you from that side. On top of that, if your jungler is clearing Raptors or Scuttle, which both have close proximity to mid, and the enemy jungler comes in for gank from the other side, you'll be easily able to run to your jungler and likely turn the fight in your favor. In losing situations where you're easily shoved in the 1v1, you should try to cooperate with your jungler where you can. Remember how earlier we talked about players that just auto-shove to the turret because they are so tunneled on winning their matchup? When you wind up against those players, call your jungler to gank, especially when you're playing champs with easy to land CC that can guarantee free kills. It's also important to call your jungler to lane when you think that there's a good chance that you can be dove. If you wind up with one of those stubborn junglers that refuse to cooperate, you might just have to back off and sit at max XP range while you feel like your tower isn't even doing enough to protect you. This whole point really makes you understand how much different roles influence each other. The easiest matchup can suddenly become unwinnable due to the jungle gank or two. And on the other side of the coin, mid div can completely decide which jungler gets a double crap in an otherwise neutral matchup. But it's not just the jungle and mid that can impact how the game goes. Whether it's influence and control on the map, carrying in team fights, or the massive pressure that they put on the side laners, every role has a champion that can be impactful in their own ways. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What role do you think is the most OP in the current meta and why? Let us know your answers in the comments down below. Now without further ado, let's get back on the topic. Our next point is a much shorter but even more important one because it's a global rule that applies to all roles. That rule is to never let a teammate force you into a fight that you aren't ready to take. And I guess this applies to real life too. Don't be pressured into something that you're not very comfortable with. It's super common to see junglers, even at the highest level, not understand that their mid laner is not always ready to take a fight at 315 for that initial scuttle crap. I'm sure a few streamers come to mind. If you're playing Anivia against Rumble, the 1v1 matchup is pretty good for you in the long run, but early on you can't all match his strength in 2v2, especially when it's in the wide open space of the river. When your jungler is demanding to fight for a scuttle crab, looking to invade, or just wants to force a fight for dragon, but you don't really have the items and levels that you need for those fights, let them know that you can't physically just do it. If they continue to force it anyways, let them die on their own. I know this sounds like it undermines everything that we just said, but working with your jungler is a two-way street, and they also have to know when to play around you and what you can do. So, when they refuse to do that, don't sink with the ship. If the fight is a guaranteed loss anyway, it's much better to leave them to die on their own rather than just giving up 2 other kills and losing all that CS and XP mid. Our first 2 points are aimed at teaching you how to successfully play the lane as a mid laner, but winning the lane doesn't always guarantee a won game. Throws are all too common in solo queue, so it's important that you need to know how to efficiently play the mid and late stages of the game as well. And that brings us to the third thing that I wish I knew before I started playing the mid lane, the importance of playing for experience. In summary, this point comes down to sidelining and when to actually group up. XP matters a lot in League. Obviously, being fed and being up in levels usually go hand in hand, so you may not actually realize how much levels themselves matter, but you get a lot from them. Not only do the base stats you get with each level play a huge part in things, but each point that you get into ranking up your abilities matters quite a bit, especially when you're hitting those ultimate power spikes. Now, I know I led off by saying that this was mostly focused on post laning, but this concept does start off in the laning phase as well. Many players associate high wave clearing on a champion with that champion great roamer. Using lane priority to help you and your jungler secure a crab, or just getting a little bit of vision can definitely be a good use of that roam timer. But anything further than that can be a bad move. When you decide to take your roam all the way down to one of your side lanes, the next minion waves will have time to make it to your mid, and the enemy mid laner is able to deny you in farm by shoving your wave to the tower. Even if you're able to successfully get a kill with your roam and help out your side laners, you wind up down a level because you're sharing XP from the plays with your allies. Even when you're playing champions that are built to roam like Talon or Twisted Fate, you should always prioritize shoving in the waves, then look for opportunities to roam and get kills elsewhere. As a general rule here, make sure that you're going for these plays to get yourself ahead. A bad mindset to have in solo queue is that you're trying to make plays to get the rest of your team ahead. Even if a play is worth it for your team from an objective point of view, remember that you're the only player in the game responsible for winning the game yourself. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that if you die and your team wins the fight because of it, that it's a bad thing. All I'm saying is that you gotta play for yourself sometimes. Maybe in the higher elos when you can trust your teammates a little bit more, it could be worth to go for these calculated plays, but I wouldn't do that until really high diamond or even Masters Plus. For now, always focus on getting yourself the lead and never go for kills that involve giving up an entire wave or more minions to tower. If you've ever been fed gold-wise but been down a level or two on your lane opponent, you know how little those kills actually mean once you get back to lane and realize that your item advantage means nothing in a 1v1. Over-roaming will lead you to losing a lot of pressure in what would otherwise be a winning lane, and in a lane that's already bad for you in the first place, you'll be bullied a lot harder, and maybe even be an easy tower dive for your opponent in a bad enough matchup. Outside of the lane phase, the biggest issue I see in regards to this point is that players have the tendency to fall into the NA ARAM meta very easily. I've heard a few different reasons, but the two most popular are, well, I didn't know what to do in the mid game, and I don't trust my team to not die if I leave them. Regardless of your reasoning, it's wrong. Perma-grouping doesn't accomplish anything but throwing your lead down the drain if you have it, and if you're already behind, you're already making things worse. Side laning is an insanely OP tactic that is often largely ignored in solo queue, especially in the lower elos. Now, that being said, of course, different categories of champions will handle side laning in different ways. If you're playing a strong dueling mid laner, you can easily side lane just as well as a top lane split pusher like Fiora or Tryndamere. For this category of champions, we'll be using Diana as our example. She can 1v1 almost any champion and can even 1v2 a lot of the time when she's fed enough. She takes towers insanely fast, so if nobody can match your split, the enemy team is forced to either give up their towers or send multiple members to hold you, giving your team an advantage for the rest of the map. Certain mid laners like Orianna, Ryze, and Cassiopeia aren't the greatest duelists in every single situation, but can split push when fed enough to hold their own. If you're not strong enough to put a lot of pressure in the 1v1, you can always use them to push waves in and then back off. Our last category of champions are the ones that generally never want to be in the side lane, mostly the support champions that you may see mid like Lulu and Seraphine, and the artillery mages like Ziggs and Xerath. Generally speaking, you'll want to be mid lane at all stages of the game with these champions, asking your ADC to sideline instead. In the worst case scenario where your ADC refuses to listen and you have to catch side lane farms as these champions, it's very important that you shove in the waves far enough that they'll crash and bounce back quickly. It's really bad when people give a half-hearted shove to a wave only for it to slowly push along the lane for the next 2 or 3 minutes. The result is you losing 4+ waves to farm while you're left to fall back into the forbidden NA ARAM that we're working so hard to avoid. Regardless of the category of champion that you're playing, I think you understand the importance of continuing to get that solo lane experience throughout all the stages of the game. Again, it's a super important concept that can help you either extend the lead that you already have or gradually build one up if you weren't already winning the game early on. I know a lot of these concepts can be tough to learn, especially if you're already set in some of the bad habits, so if you need some extra help, remember, you always have ProGuides to help you out. That wraps up things for the 3 things that I wish I knew before I started playing the mid lane. I hope you guys enjoyed our video, and if you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on content such as this. Remember, let us know what role you think is going to be the most OP in the current meta in the comments below. One last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.